Welcome to Back to the Roots podcast. This is Brian Wood, and I'm sitting down along with Mike Klein. We're talking today to Jim Wedeberg, who is the Director of International Cooperative Development for Organic Valley, and also Dan Mosgaller, who is the International Pool Coordinator or International Pool Development Coordinator for Organic Valley as well. And today we just wanted to sit down and talk about the work of on the international side of developing relationships with other companies that are doing organics in other countries. And before we get into that, why don't you guys just take a second to introduce yourselves and who you are.
Yes, hello, Jim Wedeberg, Director of International Cooperative Affairs, one of the original producers of Organic Valley, been with the cooperative for 30 years, served 10 years on the board of directors, and then the last 20 years as director of the dairy pool, and also now international development.
Dan Mosgaller. Started with organic dairy in 1995 with my family farm, shipping to Organic Valley. Worked for Organic Valley in several capacities over 10 years, and now doing international pool development work along with farming in Door County. So
before we dig down deep into the international side of things, I think we could almost have an entire podcast on Jim's history. But why don't you kind of cycle through what you have, the high level of what you've seen in the 30 years since you've, and what has led to this international relationships being needed.
So, in the beginning, we, in 88, we developed a target pricing system it was unhinged from the conventional milk price. So basically in 88 we set a price of $17.50 a hundredweight to their producers, and it took 10 years before any dairy farmer in the cooperative ever received that. But in the meantime we were growing the dairy market, the organic dairy market, and we were really sticking to our philosophy of a stable milk price. So what led to the development on the international front was it started, we've had a booth at the World Dairy Expo for a number of years, and probably 2004 or 5, a farmer from Holland stopped by the booth on the first day we were there, and he said, this is the best tasting milk I've drank here in the States. It tastes just like the milk back in Holland, and we got talking about the cooperative, and he was an organic farmer in Holland, and so every day he came by, all 5 days he came by the booth. We had a discussion, and he said, well, you need to come to Holland or you need to come to Europe. And he talked about the network of European organic milk producers that met every spring or February at the Biofach in Nuremberg, Germany. And he said, you need to come and tell the Organic Valley story to this group of producers, because there's no model like Organic Valley Crop Cooperative in Europe. And so he kept emailing me about every 6 months. And of course, we all had plenty of work to do here. But anyway, 2008, I kind of decided maybe I'd go over there in February of 2008. But then we were in a recession. Money was very tight. I didn't really feel it was a good time to go to George and ask him for the money to travel to Germany to introduce the cooperative to the European dairy farmers. So I just passed on it. And so in 2009, I went over there for the first time, presented the Organic Valley story to the group. There's 12 countries that comprise that group in Europe, Northern Europe, basically from Belgium, Austria north. But they're not all consistent members or contributors to the group. So after that, I continued to go every year. And basically, Organic Valley is the only group outside the EU that's been accepted. I mean, if there is a membership process, I mean, we've kind of been part of that group now for 11 years. So they have meetings in the spring in Biofach in Nuremberg, and then in the fall they have meetings it's been in Belgium and Luning. And so it's twice a year meetings, and they just discuss what is happening in their respective countries as far as the challenges, whether it's stanchions or feed, or what might be the challenges of the respective countries. And then they also do some discovery on what the farmers are getting paid for their organic milk, and also what the conventional farmers are getting paid, and what is the disappearance and the need for the growth of organic in those respective countries. So
because of those meetings at Biofach and your relationships there, is that where Almsco, the co-op in England that is now a part of Organic Valley, is that where that relationship started as well with Almsco?
Yes, kind of. I actually, the first year I was there, I met Richard Green at that first meeting and discussed our two cooperatives, but that further developed about 5-6 years later, as far as actually moving ahead with doing something as far as a cooperative to cooperative agreement. Because one of the things in Europe, there's not designated markets or marketers that are specifically organic. Friesland-Campina, a huge cooperative, 17,000 members. Just a handful of organic producers. Arla in Denmark, I'm not sure. They're probably 11,000 members, maybe a few more.
Largest supply of organic milk.
Yeah, but they are growing organic market. And
now, is Arla all organic?
No,
not at all.
But I think that's the point, is that all of these companies in Europe, they are primarily conventional. It sounds like they are majority conventional marketers.
The one thing that I think makes Organic Valley unique amongst all the co-ops and groups that we've come to work with organically is we're the only ones that are 100% organic with a brand. Mm-hmm. And so we always have that direct focus of always being organic and having that brand vehicle to help with the stability of price and the loyalty of the customers. We've run into several groups with a very like-minded philosophy, a very similar story of Genesis, whether it was a couple years before or after Organic Valley would have come together in the U.S. But yeah, the ones that are 100% devoted to organics, they don't have a brand, so they're always at the mercy of the processors. And the ones that have a brand are the ones that have to contend with the conventional arm of the co-op they're within. So,
because wouldn't that make it really hard to market your organic milk, like Arla did, and when we were in Denmark this past year? You can't say anything negative about the majority of the milk that you're trying to sell by promoting organics. So isn't that a really tight line to walk?
I think it is, and we've been made aware of stories within those co-ops where the tension has led to at least the attempt to maybe or the thought of doing away with the organic program. Fortunately enough, in those cases I'm thinking of, the customers that these brands were working with said, hey, if you can't deliver us organic milk along with conventional milk, we don't want to work with you, because we want a one-stop shop. We want you to provide all the milk products we need. And with the commitment to organic consumption in Europe, that was going to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. I liken it to our original arrangement when we formed the cooperative in '88, that was North Farm Cooperative in Madison. North Farm Cooperative was a distribution cooperative that serviced all the natural food stores and cooperatives in the Midwest. And basically, their initial agreement with us was that you organize the milk, you get the farmers certified, You get the cheese made, and you put it on a dock, and we'll take care of it from there. Well, 30% of it they took care of, 40% of it they took care of, maybe 50% 1 month, but they were not doing it. And you look at at North Farm's catalog, they had 15,000 items in there. You were one of or two of their 15,000 items. So they were trying to market whatever. They got commission on everything they sold. They got margin on everything they sold. And so that's the similar situation that I feel that is going on with some of the cooperatives in Europe and markets in Europe, is that, Friesche Campina, Arla, their majority of their milk, their production is conventional. So where's their focus going to be on the marketing? It's sales. It's going to be on the majority of their products. And so that's what makes Organic Valley unique in the fact that we are, like Dan said, 100% organic. We have a brand, and we're focused on marketing our product that we produce from our membership farms, and that is unique. Even when you look at the other cooperatives in Europe, Biolay in France, now growing to over 1,000, towards 1,500 members, they don't have a brand. They're basically they sell milk to supermarkets and other brands, and so they're a milk supply. So they're constantly, working on the bids and stuff for that supply. They don't have anything to fall back on. Our brand is our ace up our sleeve. Far as that, the stronger our brand is, the more leverage we have in the other marketplaces as well.
So I think one of the questions is, you've been having these conversations for 11 years. That milk is over in Europe. Europe has different standards, and we can touch on that a little bit. They have different standards than USDA certified organic, so it's over there. Why do we take the time to worry about this? That's the question that I think some people might have is, what's our concern? We have our brand, or OV has its brand. And why should we be concerned about that milk over there in Europe?
Well, that's a very good question. And my only response to that question, basically, or my original response, is that historically, farmers have worked against each other, countries have worked against each other with tariffs and other fences, to restrict production and stuff like that, or imports and exports. My thinking is there's too few of us left, independent family farms, that let's find a way, if possible, that we can work together and market. I mean, there's plenty of people that want good organic food. So how can we share a market? And I understand as we talk about sharing markets or discussing markets, we have there's some barriers there as far as what we can really
legally
speak about. But it's always been my intention that if you can level the playing field, we don't care about milk from Iowa coming to Wisconsin.
And anymore, right?
Pardon?
Anymore, but I mean, this is kind of a extrapolation of where the cooperative was for Organic Valley when, as it started, right? I mean, like Jim said, farmers have been pitted against each other, and so that's what a true cooperative is, right? Is understanding that when you pool your resource, you become a formidable force that can command or at least influence a price. And so over 15 years that happened across the United States. Well, the organic industry continues to grow on a global basis, and as we work against larger and larger dairy outfits, whether that be Arla or private dairy groups like Danone or Lactalis, we're in that same position where we need the strength in numbers. And at the very least, even if we're not going to do business together, we can at least be talking to each other. We can at least be, giving each other a leg up on what's going on around the world.
So speaking of that, that's been Dan and I's effort over the last number of years, is as we discuss, pay prices, among farmers and different groups, and what relatively those pay prices have to the conventional marketplace in the respective countries. They've always been hinged 20, 30% over what the conventional farmer has been. Our message has always been in the last 10, 11 years, those prices need to be unhitched. You need to have a milk supply management program that you can match the supply as best you can to the market needs, and then you need to have a price that's determined by the marketplace and not by a conventional product. And so, historically, now in the last year, conventional prices in Europe, Germany, the European countries fell. Organic prices stayed stable. So, that's part of the work we've been doing, is just trying to, normalize how our philosophy, spread the message about our philosophy for how farmers should be paid and how other products should be priced. And so that's been basically what we've been doing, is networking. We haven't really, been doing anything as far as promoting sales into the EU. But we've been networking our philosophy. We've been networking our philosophy on herd health, because as you stated earlier, there are some differences in the EU and the NOP as far as certification, and the big one is antibiotics. And so, we've had Dr. Guy who's been over there and presented to farmers in Germany and at the Biofach. Dr. Paul has been in Holland.
Dr. Guy was in England with us.
Yes, so we're trying to raise the standard on organics to our standard.
Yeah, because
globally,
it's a twofold benefit, right? I mean, one, we see the benefit of farmers receiving a worthy price for what they're doing and the value-added product that they're producing. But also, too, there are barriers from production standards right now, which might limit at least for dairy, the amount of product coming into the U.S. But, I mean, for us as organic producers in the U.S., we have to remember that 50% of the total organic sales in the world are made in the U.S. So, throughout market saturation and time and all those things, I mean, the next highest percentage is Germany at 9%. So I mean, that's something that if and when those producers need a market outlet, which when we saw the European quota come off in 2015, we immediately saw 5 or 7 companies that we knew in Europe that produce conventional products sending new cheese to the U.S. Right, so eventually that's going to happen in the U.S. too. So in one sense, we're trying to strengthen our own side so that our target pricing model isn't undercut in the future, and also, like I said, making sure that all producers are paid well for what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you build relationships with co-ops that use the same type of model that Organic Valley does, or are they all tied to the conventional pricing? And I guess the second part of the question would be, you've been trying to help them move toward target pricing, or not really? You're just basically talking about how it works for us?
Well, I think maybe it's not so much move towards target pricing as move towards an unhinged pay price from the conventional marketplace. That might be more what our goal has been. Mm-hmm. And Europe has a different model than U.S. does as far as how farmers are supported from the government. And so that, it's hard to equalize our pay prices, for what our farmers in the U.S. are getting paid versus a dairy farmer in Germany. Because the dairy farmer in Germany is getting perhaps part of his income from the EU subsidies, which in the U.S. right now, as we all know, there aren't any subsidies that are match what there are in Europe. So that's probably been our biggest goal, and also just being aware of of some of the animal welfare and some of the things that they are facing over there. as it comes here as well. Because, for example, Denmark, and I hesitate to, I'm thinking of quite a few years, but they have banned stall barns, stanchion barns, tie stall barns a number of years ago. Denmark also has a standard for all dairies, pasture standard, whether conventional or organic. Organic's got a higher bar, but even conventional dairies in Denmark have to have pasture.
Or Sweden. Sweden, it's a law.
Well, maybe I'm talking about Sweden.
Okay. Sweden for 20
Yep.
20 plus years, there's been a law that all producers must graze, and there's a different standard based on what area of the country you are, north to south, because of growing season. But that's actually one thing that created an unusual situation where in Sweden the organic farms are actually slightly larger than the conventional farms, because with that requirement to grazing, which kind of kept a level playing field, but then with that premium over conventional, they were a little bit more on a level playing field to start with. So then these dairies that were organic, they had that little bit of extra money around, so they would build new barns for the next generation, because Sweden, Denmark, a lot of the places in Europe had the same kind of history that we had with farm consolidation, with land consolidation, things like that. So, but yeah, I mean, it definitely has made a different outcome for those farmers. And I think, back to the original point, the development was different. Organic Valley kind of kept the entire, with their model of going straight from the farm to the shelf and doing everything in between. Again, that 100% organic with a brand. A lot of these companies are not in a position anymore where they can make that change, where we could influence them to say target pricing is what you should do, because there's a lot of risk in doing that at this point. To go out there and whether you're a supply co-op without a brand, or whether you're a small portion within a big co-op, to go out there and start to rock the boat in the waters, because they are doing better because they have received a premium. But recognizing that that's a separate product, organics is a separate product from conventional, is an attainable goal, and one that has showed dividends, because these big co-ops have kind of recognized that and separated their systems.
Are there any 100% organic co-ops in Europe?
Yes.
There are some?
Yeah, like I said.
With a brand?
No.
Okay.
Not that we're really aware of. And maybe there are, but nobody that's going to, if there was, it's on a much smaller scale, right? No one that's going to be able to kind of carry the market share influence that they would need to command that kind of pricing system within the country, right?
So that processing plant that we toured when we were in Denmark last year, was that all organic?
They're all organic, and they're a like-minded group to us. Many of them came from Arla because they didn't like how that organization was treating them. But today, that organization, while they've grown and while they've succeeded, is still only 48, 50 producers.
Mm-hmm. But it was kind of like looking at a clone of Organic Valley.
Yeah.
They were trying. Their mission was basically the same thing.
Yeah,
it was really neat to see.
And they're the exception rather than the rule in the EU, as far as having their own processing as a cooperative, and also having a brand.
Right. Yeah.
So what has been, when talking to some of these people that can have the influence on the overall price and unhinging, in having these conversations, what has been the reception?
Well, I mean, I guess their support for it. But like I said, since they've come from a different history, like I said, I've often thought, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've often thought, like I said, they don't want to rock the boat. They're doing well, and there is a social acceptance for organics throughout Europe, which may not even be as strong in the U.S. And so, while I think they like the idea, I'm not sure that we or they have really seen the opportunity to strike at that and do something. Now maybe that's going to happen in some third-party country, right? As the organic world grows globally, maybe there's an opportunity for a brand in another place. Like we saw with Amsco and Organic Valley's partnership in Kingdom Brand Cheddar. That was an attempt to provide a brand to a supply-based co-op, but it wasn't in their home country.
Mm-hmm. It's, I guess, when they did get invited back, so the pushback wasn't too bad, But like you said, their foundation and their background is completely different, and to go away from that would look really scary, because in Scandinavia the subsidies, so the money is there, because isn't Norway about half of their income is subsidies?
Yeah, it might be.
Close?
It might be as high as that, because Norway being outside the EU and very a very small area considered arable for food production.
3%, I believe.
3% was the number we heard. Yeah.
And
so
what was the average herd size in Norway?
was it
like
27 cows?
Something like
barely.
that. Yeah.
I mean, it was.
In
really,
Austria, it's 14.
okay. And then they had 25 cows and had robots.
Yeah.
And it's like-
One third of the dairy producers in Norway have robotic milkers. But I mean, you brought it up, and Jim touched on it too. But that's another part of why rock the boat, because the subsidies have really stabilized some of these operations. I mean, when you're getting and again, it's like it's been in the U.S. Some people play the game better than others, but we might see a range between 10 to upwards of 25 or 30%, especially in some of these small farms in places like Germany and Austria, which have kind of doubled down and even further supported these small farms, knowing that they made a social community decision to support that small agriculture. So if you're getting your milk price, but then you're getting 30% income on top of that, right? So again, why would you rock the boat? You're doing fairly well, and the result too is a good community structure, because the EU has this sense of fairness that doesn't exist in the U.S. And so that's part of the reason that they vote to put their taxes into the system, which pays farmers, because then organic can be available for everyone, not just like the upper echelon status symbol buy or someone that's making this. We almost even talk sometimes about, well, people make the sacrifice to buy organic products in the U.S. because they've done the research and they understand how good it is for their health or for the animals or whatever it is. But in the EU, they've kind of internalized that whole structure. So again, everybody there, maybe not all the time. It's not that people don't get taken advantage of, but they've tried to level the playing fields, and in many cases, I do think the farmers have a decent, nice quality of life. Mm-hmm. And so why would you try and alter that?
Because in Denmark, the government does a lot of promotions for organics, don't they?
Yeah.
Because there's actually what was the rating system on the restaurants? Like if you have 70 to 80% organic, you're bronze, and then a gold is 90 and over of organic food, which is really neat.
Yeah, and that's Økologisk Landforening, which is the organic association. It's not a government association, but they do receive money from the government, right? Because they're able to apply for grants. But Denmark itself, right? I mean, is a good case study of a community decision, or a country community decision of supporting organics, because people do see the benefit of doing away with some of these toxins or antibiotics, things like that. Denmark itself is they hold in their identity that they are an agricultural nation. But let's remember too, they're 5.5 million people that are a fairly homogenous demographic, right? So that makes that discussion maybe a little bit easier. But the results have been fantastic, like you say. I mean, what they've been able to do in the rating system or in food service, and working with cooks to kind of build grassroots movements, or just the fact that there's 30% market penetration. 1 in every 3 gallons of milk sold in Denmark is organic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and there was organic draft beer at every bar, which was really surprising. But what is it, Naskedog? Or what is the day where it's a national day when all the cows go out on pasture?
Let out day. Yeah.
Let out day, and
Yeah.
I can't remember what they called it, but it was like Nasge or Drasdu. Like that is pretty much a national holiday where thousands of people go out to the farms to watch the cows hit pasture for the first time.
Yeah,
like if we could do something like that with organics to promote that day, because anybody who's ever turned cows out in the spring knows how absolutely wonderful it is.
Even if it's time to start grazing or not, right? They've created that tie with the consumer, like you talked about, where the consumers know it's going to be one of these 2 days, and they're going to go out and we all as farmers know that is the best day of the year, right? When you live in a northern climate and you have to restrain your cows from grass for a time, that the jumping and kicking and turning a cow dancing, that's just perfect to me for consumers, right? But yeah, even if they're not letting, even if they let them out and put them right back in, like you said, thousands and thousands of people. What was it? Our friend Bjarne said, well, yeah, I'd even like to take a year off of it now, but I know I can't because they'd show up anyway. So
because wasn't it like 20,000 people?
20 to 40,000 people.
Yeah.
Bjarne had like 40, and Frode has had like 25,000. Yeah, that's why Frode was saying, on the same line as Bjarne, he's like, yeah, well, the neighbors all come over to help because the cars block them in, so they can't leave that day, so they may as well come over and lend a hand. So,
well, and I think part of that whole acceptance is that the pricing of the product probably is. You mentioned the sacrifice that is made to buy organic food. That's sometimes how it's phrased here in the U.S. And maybe that sacrifice isn't quite so much. As far as what you pay for on the shelf, it's different than in Europe because they pay a lower price to their farmers. But in the end, those consumers are not paying for it on the shelf. They're paying for it in their taxes. But so they made a societal decision to support that, which means that they now can they're enjoying lower pricing on their products, but that I don't think that connection has been made.
No, I think you're exactly right about that. I mean, it's probably worth mentioning for the people listening to get a picture. I mean, in the U.S. we're talking almost double price to buy a half gallon of organic milk versus conventional, where in the EU 10%, probably, give or take, maybe 15. So I mean, it is a substantial difference. So, but yeah, I mean, they are subsidizing it, and again, there's this difference between our societies about this level of fairness, which we're in the U.S. I think, and again, it's just an opinion, but we have this opinion of coming to the U.S. and having the freedom to make your own way, right? And that's where we haven't gotten behind some of the government, because you're free to go out there and work hard and make your money. So however it comes about, yeah, you are right. At the end of the day, they're all paying for it, but it does come out at a place where people
just
feel
from a different pocket.
Yeah, right, right.
Now, when was it? 5-6 years ago when we ran into the Organic Meadows cooperative people from Canada. Have you worked at all with that cooperative?
We've kind of lost a little bit of track. Organic Meadows themselves went through a very difficult period, and they were heavily aligned with one of the major grocery stores, and that was about 50% of their sales. And that grocery store decided to kind of walk away, find a new supply. So they went through a period of pretty strong restructure. They're still going, and yeah, that's one of the to-do list items is to make that reconnection. But of course, Canada too has a much different system with the dairy board and the quotas, organic or conventional, and how that stabilizes the pay of farmers across the board.
We were involved with a processor, major store distributor in Canada here probably 15, 18 years ago, prior to Organic Meadows, to perhaps organize a supply of milk in Ontario for this store. But the problem was and it isn't necessarily a problem. It's just a whole different structure. In Canada, everything goes through the farmer-run dairy board. So if you have a supply of milk and you're short of milk, they allocate that milk to all the bottlers in an equal proportion. And so we couldn't choose if we were the organic supply in Canada that this store got the supply. The dairy board would make the decision. Anybody that had an organic fluid milk program would be eligible to have a portion of that supply.
At their determined price?
No. Well, I should back up. I guess I can't recall for sure. It would have an organic value to it. Mm-hmm. And how that was determined, I think, was perhaps based on a percentage base at that time over conventional paper.
Because you hardly ever hear about organic milk in Canada. You hear a lot about the grains coming in. There's lots of oats and small grains coming in from Canada. Is there a significant organic dairy market in Canada? I mean, are there multiple co-ops or are there big companies that have organic supplies?
I guess, I don't know, Jim, if you know better than I do. I mean, there is a demand there, but I mean, certain markets have accepted it better than others. And I mean, not to divert from where you were asking, but one that comes to mind for me is Australia. Mm-hmm. Australia is a developed nation. They're an agricultural nation. They have a small population. For all those reasons, you would think that there's a strong organic movement there, but there's not. And you can look at places like New Zealand or Ireland where it's harder for people to make the differentiation about what is organic, because here in the U.S. we've made there's such a easy distinction to be drawn from grazing. Because when you're, pretty much at this point, sure, there's a few conventional small farm grazers left out there, but predominantly you're looking at confinement conventional and grazing organic. Mm-hmm. And so when you're in New Zealand or Ireland, people don't see that. And when you dig down to the layer of in New Zealand, like the amount of urea that's put on conventional fields to continue growing that green grass year round, people don't think about that on the consumer side, right? Mm-hmm. to the majority. So yeah, I mean, of course, for different reasons and different things, sometimes the organic movement just hasn't become as strong. Like mm-hmm. I said, there's $100 billion of total organic sales in the world, and half of those are right here in the U.S.
No. But the differentiation between organics and conventional in Europe, you said, a 10% price premium at the store, but the differentiation isn't nearly as clear as it is here either, is it?
That's true, because Europe for 25 years has not, allowed low-grade feeding of antibiotics in feeding animals. Yep. Mm-hmm. And so the antibiotic issue is not as prevalent in the consumer's mindset as it is in the U.S. They've had more focus on the animal welfare all along, and they've had more consistent focus on working with pasture and things like that. So the marketing tools that we've had in the U.S., RBGH, for example, never was allowed in Europe. Mm-hmm. That's what built our organic fluid milk program in the late 90s, right. Was an alternative to that for organic producers and conventional organic consumers and conventional consumers just as well, if they were looking for a source that wasn't treated with that, didn't have that in the milk. Also, it's just like, we've been given gifts here that they haven't had, so it's harder for them to differentiate the price or the differences in the organic, and so basically that's what the EU CAP program has helped them do. And one thing is important to Europeans, as I see it, is that they have a lot more focus on nature
and green space.
and green space. So, the population is so dense, and in most of Europe, that people in the cities and small towns, they want a place to go walk their dog and their children, and so they have paths through farmers' pastures.
And you can get a subsidy for that.
And so they get subsidized for allowing, having these walking paths right through your farm that people just go strolling, on weekends or after work. Meadow birds, for example, in Holland. If you improve the habitat for meadow birds and along a nature's path, that also earns you some more subsidy dollars. So it just has a little bit more respect or desire for having more nature and green space for the whole community to enjoy.
Yeah, because there's, I think that there's a good point that you make right at the end there about the commons, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is a more common idea in Europe than it is in the U.S., just because of the longer history, where in times past there were areas of common use that you could graze cows or walk cows, but also to that point of green space is the urbanization. We here certainly know and recognize how many more people are living in cities, and we often in the Midwest or areas where there is good agricultural land talk about urban sprawl, right, and how much good land is put under concrete or pavement or something like that. But when you look at just the population density between Moscow and Dublin, there's 700 million people, and that's in a space that would stretch roughly about the Mississippi River back to Maine. We've still got 2/3 of our country, and not that it's all good agricultural land, but once you get past the Mississippi, that's our breadbasket, right? I mean, that's all the plain states and the grazing lands in the West, and still the West Coast on top of that. I mean, I don't know if this stat is fully accurate, but I do think I remember in preparing a presentation earlier this year that Europe is about 50% urban in land space. When you take in all the little towns and all the big cities. And so that's why, and coming off the heels of World War II, where they saw massive starvation after the destruction, they see very clearly that need to preserve environment and nature, where we in the U.S. might still take that a little bit for granted. Because when I was looking at those same statistics, the highest amount of urbanization I found in a state was like 35 or 40% in Connecticut. Right, but otherwise the U.S. is about 10% urbanized. So again, just contingent factors of where you are and what people have come to see over time. They see that benefit of supporting and preserving that, because they have seen it go away faster than probably what we have. Mm-hmm. So.
But we are seeing more and more young people move to the cities, and there's a lot more urbanization amongst that going there to get a job, essentially. And so what you just said there almost gives me a little bit of hope for we complain a little bit in our world that these kids, they're getting away from the farm and they aren't taught any values and but if they're doing that, maybe at some point it's finally going to hit that point where, hey, we don't have any green space around here. We better make sure we support this, these farms that are doing it right.
Well, or maybe our way of coming about seeing that won't actually be in the land use, but where the people are located. Because, that's one of the great things about the value-added market that organic has provided so many people is maybe the value-add system has brought the ability for someone in suburbia to go back, because that shift in demographics has happened so quickly here in the U.S., right? In 50 years, we went from 50% of the population involved in agriculture to less than 1. Well, call it 70 years now, from 1950 till today. And so those people, I think there's an inherent desire of some of those people to come back, and people are disillusioned with not knowing what their purpose is You hear these stories of people living in suburbia and they want a cause, right? They want something to make life a little bit more substantial. And farming provides that, because you're working with the stewardship of land, working with living things.
And it requires a community.
Exactly.
Farming requires a community. You will not be successful. We just talked with Brent and Regina Beidler yesterday, and they came from a farming background where they had they were skipped a generation from their parents weren't farmers, but their grandparents were. Yeah. And they basically told us that, hey, we would absolutely never have survived without the local farming community chipping in and helping us when we needed help and giving us advice, and just it wouldn't have worked if we didn't have that.
And that's why we have to take advantage across our local community, across the United States, across the world, to make sure that the declining amount of farmers is stemmed, or that knowledge and that ability is maintained, because it's a cornerstone of society. I mean, if you look across time and history, no matter where you are, if you're in Rome or some of the places in Greenland or the Anasazi Indians in the Southwest, when people lose the basis of how to produce food, their societies are at risk. Mm-hmm. So I mean, this movement of organics, I mean, and just local community farming. I mean, if I heard right, in the Northeast and New England, for the first time in a long time, there are some places that are showing an increasing number of farmers.
Oh wow!
And there's it's these young kind of back to the landers that are taking advantage of small farming, CSAs, things like that. So it might not be the true production farming that even we've gotten used to in the last 100 years, but it is providing that access of people to reconnect with nature, with community, and yeah.
I think the Wendell Berry quote. I'm not sure if I can get it exactly right, but the eyes to acres ratio is way off right now. Yeah. We need to get more people back to the land, more people involved in the acres, not one set of eyes on 20,000 acres. Because we can talk about urban development and all this, but we also have to talk about the size of some of these farms. I believe we need to get more people back and and I think that's what's so wonderful about Organic Valley, that we have given the 30 cow, the 40 cow dairy an opportunity to pass that farm to the next generation. And there's not much of that happening right now. And if we can move that needle in a little way, and these kids see that, hey, this is fun, maybe they'll start milking or doing whatever on another little farm.
Well, a really somewhat sad story, and I'm not going to say the name of the milk company because we work with them, but they had an honor of, it was at their annual meeting, and they were honoring the Young Farmer of the Year. And he got up and he spoke, and he went and said, and this is conventional, went and said, well, thank you, but we're going out of business. We can't do it with these prices anymore. Wow. If that's not, I mean...
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think being that this is the 30th year for Organic Valley, and coming from Central Holmes County to see what the organics, and not just Organic Valley, because Horizon has farmers there too, but just to see what organics has done for the small farm is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, we're talking bringing millions of dollars into our local economy there, and that money doesn't leave. Okay, some of it goes to Walmart, I'm sure, but for the most part, the local equipment dealers and the Plain community, we talked about this today, Brian, the Plain community doesn't buy online. They don't buy at the big box stores. They buy local, and they support that. And that money stays local, and it's creating a thriving farming community in an area that the farms are dying out simply because of the conventional prices. And hopefully we can keep adding these small farms and keep growing the number of small farms that we can save. Because I think that is the true testament of what Organic Valley was trying to achieve and has achieved by the stable pay price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and tying it back into the international side of things, we talked about including the entire community of organic farmers and trying to get them value for their product, right? We talked about it from that angle, but also as far as Organic Valley specifically, as well as the rest of the organic dairy industry, there's a concern that if the international organic milk situation isn't decoupled, essentially, there are going to be pricing models that milk can come into the United States at significantly cheaper prices than we are paying for it here in the U.S. And that's a threat to these communities that rely on organic milk to keep them alive.
Yeah, and the support is there. Something I think Jim and I talk a lot about within that is and it's a reassuring thing. But farmers, once they meet each other, there's that inherent way of thinking of people that those people over there are scary. Mm-hmm. And we're often told by people that would like to use some measure of divisiveness for their own benefit that those people over there are scary, and they are the ones that caused your problem.
Well, sometimes, Dan, they.
but the point is, as we've gone around the world, and no matter what the details of the production model, no matter what the details of the maturation of the organic or agricultural system, farmers still hold more in common than they do apart. Mm-hmm. And when they meet each other, they understand that, and then it's less difficult to try and push forward with this idea of maintaining the knowledge of stewardship with the land and maintenance of local community.
And I think that's why we promoted our regional understanding tours. We found them to have a benefit in the U.S. when we have our membership go visit our Organic Valley members in other regions and understand the challenges that they face in their organic production. And it's the same thing as, our farmers hear a lot of rumors and stories about the European farmers and, what they get and what benefits they have or don't have and things like that. But when they have the opportunity to spend some time talking with farmers from different regions, and the EU, they understand that they have a lot more in common than they have a difference. And, so they understand the challenges they face with their population stresses and the regulations perhaps that they have that we don't not have yet. And so it is a good education tool for our farmers to better understand what farmers are doing in other parts of the U.S. as well as the world.
Mm-hmm. There's I guess I'll just mention, we're out here at the 30th annual meeting for Organic Valley, and one of the farmers from Ohio was here, and he said he was for the first time, and he was really nervous about coming. He said, I didn't think I had anything in common with anybody else here, and I come to realize that I have more in common with every farmer here than I have differences. And I think that just is the exact thing that you're trying to do globally, is to have farmers are farmers. They're passionate about what they're doing. And if we can build a global community, I believe that's kind of what you're trying to do here. Really? Look. Luckily, Brian can.
Can't bring you anywhere.
Yeah. Go wait in the truck.
But I think to flip what we were just talking about dispelling the idea of differences, like the Organic Valley annual meeting and some of the things that some of the rut tours or connections that we've been able to build, it is such a reassuring and invigorating position to know that you're not the only one out there. For so many people that have been involved with organics for a long time or are the first one that are going to be involved with organics in their area, I mean, there's a lot of social maybe retribution or at least kind of taunting, right? That they get. And so, again, that's for us in organics, whether that's around the world or, like you said, coming to this annual meeting, which is always such a pleasure, is something that you can go home again and you can feel like no matter what people are saying or no matter how bad the situation is or if you're in a community that's losing ground to urbanization or something else faster, that feeling of belonging, that there are others out there like you and you have a support system and you can stand firm to what you believe in.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jim and Dan, there anything else you want to mention? If not, I really appreciate this. This was really interesting. And Jim, I do want to congratulate you and all your successes with Organic Valley. 30 years from something that wasn't supposed to work to 30 years and the amount of farmers that you have given a second chance and the next generations are going to have a chance to farm is really something to be proud of. So I just want to thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for that. And basically, my final thought is that, from the beginning, we never felt like we had any secrets from other farmers. If other farmers, other groups came to us and wanted to talk to us about market or organics, we sat down and told them what we knew. And so Dan and I are basically carrying that same philosophy across the pond right now. Mm-hmm. We sit down with farmers in other countries and we basically tell them what we know. Mm-hmm. Because, we all are here to provide quality food, for our citizens in our respective countries. And we can't live in a fear that they're going to overtake our market. We gotta learn to work together and so we can all survive in our respective countries. So that's basically our goal and our mission in the international department is communicating the goodness of Organic Valley Crop Cooperative and how we are open and willing to help other farmers in other regions be successful as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Really appreciate you guys taking the time. I know it's been a busy week, and for you taking the time to sit down with us tonight, I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Want to give you guys the credit too for these podcasts because I've listened to a couple, I've been involved with a couple, and what you're doing for recording and making kind of a historical record of the people that have been involved with this movement is vastly important and very valuable. And so thank you guys for doing this.
We can cut it off there because we don't need that.
Yeah.